Hello people, sorry today I haven't even managed to curl my hair. Life's been a little bit hectic. It ain't a lot of fun being a middle-aged woman, and especially a single middle-aged woman, single mother middle-aged woman. Especially when you have landlords who are feeling like they miss their houses and want to come around and have a quick look, and you've only got a couple of days and you've got to get ready. What would do us a hell of a lot of good towards housing affordability as if we got rid of our Dickensian tenancy laws. That would be friggin' awesome. And if we stopped selling houses to people that couldn't afford them, and there were actual landlords that could afford to be landlords, that would also be a good start. And whilst I'm on it, I want to talk about the World Cup. So these guys, the Germans, like this, what were they dabbing and accidentally slapped their own faces? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, what would be really cool is if they had said something sort of important, like, hey, 6,500 people died making this. Maybe we should have not gone. Maybe we shouldn't make stupid political statements just for the sponsorship. And maybe the minister sat there, obviously in a position where nobody could touch her or do anything to her, might want to consider the other white Western women out there who are probably going to get a bit of a hard time. Anyway, I digress. Hello and welcome. One of the things I have learnt growing up and on my travels is that there is no they. We often talk about they. They want us poor. They want to control us. Look at what they have done. One of the saddest realities growing up, apart from there is no end of year special person, is that there is no they. Not only was it my father skipping up and down the corridor pretending to be Rudolph, but there is actually no one driving the bus. Sure, there are maybe a few groups or gangs of people who might pretend to themselves they do, but we are sat in the back seat and no one is driving. No they, no one to blame, no one in charge to complain to. We are actually responsible for the world we live in. The government that serves us and the lives we lead. Sure, there are some huge caveats to that, but basically, it's up to us to pull our sleeves up and be the change we wish to see. Take an interest, be a part of the community, volunteer, speak out, learn about your government. We like to think that they are corrupt and have sinister intentions. Sure, there are some really greedy people, but mostly it's incompetence and apathy that affects the world. The apathy is generally ours. There are so many of us sat doing bugger all blaming they, as we sit in the back of the bus. As Rumi said, when I was young, I wanted to change the world, and now I'm old and wise, I wish to change myself. So I have a great respect for those that do get out there. It isn't easy being a politician or an advocate. I can tell you, sure, some of them deserve a swift kick in the rear, but so do we, because it's the we that failed to hold them accountable. And we're sleeping in the back of the bus, hoping someone else would do the driving. I've always been involved, either volunteering or on some kind of mission of advocacy. I remember in New Zealand, in a small town, they decided, the council, that the sewerage needed connecting instead of septic tanks or biocycles. The properties were valued and charged sometimes tens of thousands for connection. It cost many elderly their homes. I remember standing up at the public meeting and saying, brings a new meaning to spending a penny, doesn't it? You see, like a friend said, it's like the scene with Nicolas Cage in the movie Con Air. Just why didn't he put the bunny back in the box? You know when the lines crossed and that's it? Well, the NDIS was the bunny in the box for me. Oh, so the little town in New Zealand did get their sewerage connected. Many did their bit by ringing the council and asking to speak to Sue Ridge, but we did get together and do our best. But the they? Well, this was a location that had also bitchmised over the manhole covers. So when the workers were out walking around town with metal detectors looking for where the fuck they'd put them, can only one imagine the flack they got. I can tell you, with regards to contribution in society, you want to take a leaf out the disabled communities book. Never have I seen a community so on the ball, so well informed, so eager to drive the bus, and so underestimated. Hence, these last state and federal elections, there was quite a movement. Now, they may not realise it, but we, as people with disability, just like everyone else, have the power. So angry about bunnies and exasperated by the failing NDIS and the total circus unveiling before us, I donned a red shirt and did the only thing I had left to do. I got off my ass. I wanted Linda Reynolds and the horse that brought her out of town. So did a great many others for the same reasons, including climate change. I mean, really, the coal skip was just embarrassing. If we aren't the holders of the next technology, the next energy source, and we don't get off our ass, we won't be first world in the next age. We will be the proverbial caveman holding that lump of coal. Throughout history, every ruling civilization has been the owner of the most advanced technology. It was and always will be the key. Believe in climate change whilst we now buy an inflatable raft with our first aid kits, or don't. The fact about technology is very real. Oh, that in women. I mean, whether I be standing up or sitting down isn't really going to affect that. I do get my business done, gentlemen. Anyway, we wanted Bill Shorten and NDIS reform, and we got him. Fingers crossed, as they say. Now, for the next round and into the future now, today we are having a meet and greet with the Honourable David Spiers, Leader of the Opposition, that's the Liberal Party, and Member for Black. He is also the Disability Minister. Now, this is something I really, really like, because disability not being shoved in the charity case portfolio is something I could get used to. He is touted as being a fresh change, and do you know that? He appears to be. He promises people who vote for him they will get the man. We discuss a range of things together, including the time I attended a Liberal breakfast with a very rusted on Liberal 93-year-old who, due to a mishap, was wearing Milo sneakers. Well, actually, they were granny pants. You know, the kind you pull up, keep your back warm, and you tuck under your bra? Well, on him, all I had to do was cut holes in the side and he'd have looked like a pink minion in a onesie. Anyway, more about that later. David is approachable and aware. He needs to listen. So take an interest, listen also, because it's up to us if we allow our politicians to drive, to give directions sometimes. Thank you for your time listening, and for more, go to carersandadvocates.com. In the meantime, may we always value life by the measure of the quality of the life lived, and never by any other measure. Well, welcome, David. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And as we know, you are now the new leader of the opposition, being the Liberal Party.
Yes, I am. It's a big job.
It is a big job. Is it what you expected?
Look, I think it's going better than I expected, actually. I thought it was going to have some real challenges, which it will and does have. But I've unified the team and modernising the party and moving forward, so I'm very happy about that.
You seem to have brought in a lot of ringers for your team.
Yes, I've got lots of new people, lots of energetic people, people with different backgrounds, so I'm very, very happy about that. Lots of renewal. And a lot of the older faces within the party that people might have become accustomed to have moved on, which is probably necessary.
When I saw Stephen Marshall just before the last election, he looked like a man that was resigned to becoming a sea of red. And I think that there were a lot of things in the media and at the time that was pushing it. The media sort of have their own idea about how they're going to spin things. And it's something that's very confusing for people out there seeking to vote, especially young people who aren't voting. So I'm very pleased to see a younger man in your post, and especially somebody with those climate issues, and also somebody who is the Disability Minister. Is there a reason why that you've taken it on, David?
Yeah, well, I've taken a range of portfolios as the leader, and that's maybe a little bit unusual. I've kept the environment portfolio, as you alluded to, with the climate policy in it, because I was the Environment Minister for 4 years, and it's a real driving passion of mine, environment and conservation. So I really wanted to keep that and continue to put the emphasis that comes with the leadership on that area. The disability portfolio was quite, I think people are quite surprised I've taken that one. My mum works as a carer under the NDIS. I know a fair bit about how it works or doesn't work, as the case may be. And through my job as a local MP, which is my job first and foremost, I'm a local MP before I'm leader of the party, I have done a reasonable bit of work in the disability advocacy space and programme development at a community level, and thought,
you must have people coming through the door.
Yeah,
going,
a lot. And so I thought I could do something with this one. So have held on to that portfolio.
You tend to, when you get a hold of things, continue to do them, and that's the good thing with the environment portfolio, because then projects don't get dropped or suddenly changed. You often find when a new minister comes on deck, that it just gets abandoned.
And even though I'm in opposition, my knowledge and understanding and passion for the environment portfolio enables me to hold the government to account in a way that a new shadow minister with not the same background in the portfolio as I had might not be able to do. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep those projects alive. I wanted to keep scrutiny on them, because we were doing lots of good things in the environment in South Australia, and I don't want them changed for the sake of it. So trying to keep that pressure on the government to keep environment front and centre.
So you've been a bit of an everyman in the past. accessible to all people, from what I can see, having a bit of a dig around you. Is that something that, were you to become Premier, that would remain the same?
It's really important to me. So, I'm not sitting in a safe seat like some political leaders get the privilege of. Actually, I don't see that as a privilege. I think that's how you become a cloistered elite. I sit in a seat that's traditionally a Labour seat. I held on to it reasonably comfortably, but I don't take it for granted. And so that keeps me really grounded. I'm out and about in my electorate all the time. I live there. I play there. I work there to an extent with my electorate office down in Hallett Cove. And being available to people to stop and talk to, whether it's in the shops, in the street, my door's always open to people. It has to be in the electorate, and to an extent as a minister or as the future Premier of the state. That's important.
I mean, with me, I'm not anybody, I'm not Nine News or, anybody like that, but you were more than willing to come along and have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we bumped into each other at a lunch, at an awards ceremony or similar. It was the top 100 business thing.
Something like that.
And we got chatting, and I said, well, let's not just quickly chat over lunch. Let's catch up and have a proper meeting. And I hope we can continue that dialogue, because I need to have people in the environment portfolio or in that arena, people working in disability, and people from all walks of life feeding into me about what their priorities are, what makes this state tick, because that's how you can be a good leader, listening and building those relationships.
And what do you see could be done better about disability in South Australia?
I feel that when it comes to the political side of disability, the political portfolio, it's often been a bit of a tack on, especially with the arrival of the NDIS and the withdrawal of many of the state resources, in a way that there's a very clear argument for why that would occur, but it sort of diminished, in a practical sense, the disability portfolio to the point where you didn't really know what it was for. You could almost get rid of the state disability minister and it wouldn't change things for a lot of people because you've got the NDIS in place, or so could be argued. I actually think there's a really nice role, a really valuable role for the disability minister in advocacy in particular, trying to do things really much, much better in a way that doesn't see people with a disability as people that just need to be helped. Sees it as much more of a way to make their day-to-day lives as normal as possible, as give them as many opportunities as possible. I lead a party that's, in my view, all about opportunities. Those opportunities shouldn't be just confined to the wealthiest people in our community or the most networked people in our community. We need to give everyone opportunity. That's why I'm in politics. And I think with a few little tweaks and creating proper pathways and supporting organizations that support people with disabilities, we can actually lift multiple generations of people who do have disabilities, lift them up and give them opportunity.
Well, only 10% of people with a disability are on the NDIS. The other 90%, we're talking about, was it 350,000 people in the state, don't have the NDIS. So the withdrawal of those services sort of left them high and dry. And especially when we're talking about education, and it's still very much segregated, and in healthcare as well. It's something that a lot of people with disability have felt quite frightened during the COVID pandemic, especially now that people don't have to quarantine if they have COVID. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
On the quarantining side of things, look, it's difficult. In many ways, we have to learn to live with this disease. I think we are now doing that. But health advice out just this week is encouraging people to wear masks again in indoor settings. So there seems to be a step back. We take a couple of steps forward and then a step back in this pandemic. Obviously, many people with disabilities are more vulnerable for obvious reasons when it comes to possibly catching COVID. But we do have to move on. And the greater the greater disadvantage from the pandemic, in my view, was the social isolation. It was the distancing from one another for good reason, but the way people have the after effects of that isolation, that loneliness in our community.
And we're seeing that in the mental health numbers.
Yeah,
that
and that's
are rising.
something that I think is the pandemic of the pandemic.
I totally agree. I know people that work as paramedics, and they're saying like it's all mental health related. It's
hugely.
Absolutely overburdening the system.
And those people who might have vulnerabilities around mental health in the past are seeing it exacerbated. They are obviously a bit more vulnerable, but there's a whole pipeline of new people showing signs of mental illness, young people. And I think much of this has been brought about because of the pandemic.
Well, we only have 10 mental health beds in the Women and Children's Hospital for young people, and they are turning young people away and on a daily basis. Yeah. And even the new hospital is going to have, 25 beds.
In the year 2032.
And you think,
that's a decade away.
Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
I know with CAMS, if you're trying to do anything like that, they work as hard as they can, but there's a huge gap in education. It's the same in disability. When you're trying to deal with a client with disability in the healthcare system, in the hospital system, because we don't have a healthcare system, we have a hospital system.
Yes. And we're all about building bigger and better hospitals and not necessarily looking at care.
Yeah, and there's a process where it's, very Henry Ford. You must enter at this point and then and be processed and spat out here. You can't come in here. You can't come in there. We can't bolster community general practice, which is Chris Moy is very much an advocate for that. He had some brilliant ideas on how to make things work a lot better. But we're just doing more money at the same thing. The more ambulances we have, of course, there's going to be greater ramping because there's more of the bloody things ramping.
Not getting through the door at the top of the ramp.
All the reasons why. But when you are sat with somebody with a disability, for 29 hours in ED and then they pass away.
It's horrifying. Yeah.
And I've been there several times and suffered the moral injury of doing that. And I found it very isolating that trying to talk to health ministers, trying to talk to people here and say, you're an honourable, you're an important person, and try and say, hey, this is happening. I need somebody to hear me and do something about it. And then feel like you're leaving before you've arrived, you're somewhere else to be, you're not listening, and then away you go, and then you're left feeling patronised, and that little symptom of that problem continues to exist, and nothing gets done about it. There isn't anywhere else. And then a fortune spent with Anne Marie and her.
Yeah.
Now, we know that with some people that are perhaps more difficult to look after for various different reasons, providers can cherry pick. And so we have people that go through several providers and they say, no.
Yeah.
And they end up in the hospital. And I don't feel that that the royal we know why they're ending up there, or that they're perhaps not listening to the advocates that are definitely telling them that these people are the unwanted, the difficult, the untouchables, the ones where you can't mitigate your risk, where we don't have particularly the skills for the high level care for those people. So we have a pseudo institutionalisation of those people, where we keep shoving them either in St Margaret's or Hampstead or the Repat or now Regency Green. People that perhaps are unsuitable to be in places like that. And, some of us are sat back and watching and waiting for it to go boom. And it will.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is really sad. That shouldn't happen in a modern, developed nation, should it? But it is happening.
But it is happening.
It is happening. Not necessarily to a lot of people, but to the people that happens to, the impacts are profound. They're huge. And
it's a large percentage. And it's those that for whom the NDIS was meant for. At the moment, there's a huge percentage who are actually children.
Yes.
With autism.
Yes.
And that is a state responsibility. They should be integrated into education system. But I didn't perhaps feel that a minister for it, as lovely as she is, was perhaps the answer. We can't have a minister for everything.
No, it's virtue signalling when you do that. The idea that governments pick certain things to appease a particular cohort of people, notwithstanding that there is definitely need there and definitely need to support people with autism, particularly younger people with autism. The idea of having a minister for that area is unusual. And I'm not necessarily criticizing that, but I don't have a shadow minister for autism because I think that, as you identify, is the responsibility of education and the education minister, and to an extent the health minister and the disability minister. But the idea that we have one minister for that doesn't sit with me particularly comfortably, and that's why I haven't reflected that in my shadow ministry. I'm not just going to chase Labour on these things.
No, as somebody on the spectrum with 4 children I can tell you that it wouldn't have been something that I would have sought for myself. I homeschooled, and they're at all levels on the spectrum as well. So I'm aware of all variants.
Yes.
I think my eldest child actually went to school in Old Rain in Aberdeen, and she's very much on the spectrum, and she just went to school with all the other kids.
Yeah.
You can say it was a tiny school, but it was difficult for them. They had to learn. They had to have a new education. There's a lot of assumptions. We all have assumptions with disability. I know myself, when I first started working in disability, I assumed Australia, everywhere is accessible. Well, it isn't. You can go and have an X-ray and they don't have a lifter, and so that person can't have an X-ray. And we're coming to 40 years since the Disability Discrimination Act. I know in the RA that, the shower hoses are like this, so if you're trying to, you can't, nobody thought about that. Or, bone density scan, there are no lifters, you can't do it. And I think in medical, that's unforgivable.
I think in medical, certainly. When I speak to people with a disability, they're the first to say, we don't need to get everywhere.
No.
We've got a disability. We understand that means we don't get everywhere.
We rough it. We have portable ramps.
We'd like
we rough
particular places to go above and beyond, so that those places, medical's one of them. When I was the National Parks Minister, we sought to create, we couldn't make every national park fully accessible, but people with a disability never asked me to do that. They wanted some defined spatial places to be able to go and experience and fall in love with nature.
Like the Beach Project.
Yep, so the Beach Project, I actually did that before I was elected to the ministry. When I was first an MP, a partnership with Seacliff Surf Lifesaving Club in my electorate, we call it Beach for All, which is a mat, and these mats are more common now, that allows wheelchairs, and not just wheelchairs, walkers or prams or anything, down to the water's edge. The difference is, though, it's not just about rolling out the mat, it's about wrapping services and support around it. So it's not out every day. It's out when surf lifesavers are there. And those surf lifesavers have built up a knowledge and understanding through training of what they need to watch out for, of how to support people with a disability when they come to the beach. The Surf Club has invested through grants in water-friendly devices that wheelchairs can move into, and to give people the experience of getting salt water around their bodies in a way that they otherwise wouldn't.
Yes, I used to have to go and get a bucket and then run and get a bucket and then go and chuck it on them.
Well,
right, I'm getting the water
like
now.
This isn't just about throwing a piece of infrastructure across the sand. It's Beach for All. It's a program. We started that in 2016 and we renewed it earlier this year, got a new mat, different technology, and continue to build those programs. The new mat's much better.
You can take a power chair down at Selleck's Beach.
Just on the sand because it's flatter.
One has to be careful.
Yes.
Or you can drive on the beach.
Yeah, you can drive on the beach.
I have tried it and we have been bogged as well.
Yeah, you've got to be careful. And that's the thing. At Seacliff, they've got all the things to make it
you can't
easier.
take someone in the water there at Selleck's, but you can and that's the difference, is the whole program.
Yeah. And Seacliff Surf Lifesaving Club was Club of the Year this year in the Surf Lifesaving Awards, and this was a part of it because they'd gone so much beyond just keeping people safe between the flags. They want to actually support people to have that experience on the beach, and I'm so proud of them.
You should be. I think also with having an ageing population, it warrants that things are accessible.
Yeah,
and homes as well. And if you have ageing in place, and people have the ability to, maybe they have the money to be able to afford their last few years in home with their family. The problem often is that they have to remodel their entire bathroom and things like that. Those things haven't been considered. And I think that's sad.
I'm a big advocate for keeping people where appropriate in their community for as long as possible, because I see that as a local member of parliament. I feel that not always, but most people who can age in place and who can have the support to do that, maybe through a little bit of assistance at home with gardens, with cleaning, with their meals and things like that, with those tweaks to their home to be more accessible, I find by and large those people are happier.
But generally, once those people need to have a two-person transfer, and you need that particular equipment,
becomes much harder.
That's it. They go over the aged care amount. And
and
you
it's
in the
easier
nursing
to
home,
put you
no
in a home.
choice.
Yeah, and the house gets sold, etc. Yeah.
Yes. So those things, I think, are work in progress. I think we'll move back to that sort of model, maybe, hopefully one day. But we don't build communities anymore. And you refer to, in your natural speech, you refer to Seacliff, the little village, and
yes,
that's because of where you're from.
Yes,
and it's like, mate, it's not anymore.
Well, I think some communities have a stronger sense of community and connectedness to others. Yeah. So in my electorate, I would say that Seacliff, Marino, Kingston Park area is like a coastal village. There's a strong sense of community there. Many of our regional communities retain that strong sense of community. But you're right, we have seen a dilution of that over a couple of generations.
In our planning. I mean, Mount Barker is a great example. When you're driving back from Strathalbyn on that road back, you just see a sea of houses.
Well,
and there's not enough services.
Every time I go up there, there's another suburb almost being bolted on.
But they're not being asked to provide, when you don't have communities, one of the things that then DIS asks for is what is your social capital? And social capital means neighbours, friends, family, those sorts of things. That if you have a community, we wouldn't necessarily be looking at this $100 billion bill that's coming our way. You could shave 20, 30% off of that simply because a lot of things are they don't have somebody to open a door. They don't have somebody to make. Because if you've got those things that we had in our communities, growing up.
Yes.
And certainly our grandparents did. The old looked after the young looked after the old, and then we all looked after each other.
Yes.
If we require the government to come and do every little thing for us, I don't think the government's going to be tenable. No,
I don't think we can afford it without putting taxes through the roof and crippling people's ability to pay those taxes. I think it is cheaper, quite simply, for a village, for many villages. And it's not a bad thing that it's cheaper. We shouldn't be motivated to do it because it's cheaper. That's a great bonus. We should be motivated to try and achieve that because it's better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. But there are a lot of people at the moment in the rental crisis, and housing is very expensive, that if you're disabled and you're renting a house, you can't do your modifications anyway, and there's only so much one can afford. Most of the specialist disability accommodation, they make a very good return on it, but it's actually in contravention to the United Nations human rights for deinstitutionalisation. They don't choose who they live with. They don't have a a private space to socialise with. So, you can't meet family. It's assumed that you don't have any, and you're on your own. Whereas I'm all about building microboards and building in that social capital into people's lives, so they've got somebody other than my face to look at that they can say, she really sucks, I hate her today. And they need to have that and feel like I'm not going to spit in their tea. And there's not that there at the moment. The weekend before last, I went to Sydney for a girlfriend with cerebral palsy, and she grew up in an institution here. She was a little girl when the Queen came that was chosen to walk her to the plane, and she met Princess Diana and Prince Charles. She was actually sitting on the side of the road waiting for an access cab, and Princess Diana was concerned about this little girl because she's gorgeous. She's a very, may I say, bonny girl, and she still is beautiful. And she had been with her partner for 15 years, dementia, cancer, and we had reported fraud last year. I'd bailed her out for Christmas, got her going, she got a new team going, and he, and I went to see her because her partner it was time for him to go. So I went to, see what I could do for her. A lot of my work is like that, where you're continuing something that's a part of your soul, it's a part of your family, it's community. You're making these communities. And it was so hard to have privacy with her.
Yeah,
and I got really emotional about it. And it was hard for her to have privacy, because when you've got carers and stuff, it's hard to have that privacy with the one that, you love that's just passed away. So
I guess often we forget about that, we being people without a disability, that one of the things that you could trade away or lose is privacy, because of people in and out, and not necessarily people who you are able to build relationships with over time either.
Not when you're shoved in a group home and you don't choose who you're going to live with, and you don't have the private area, and you can't choose your pets, or you can't choose when you're going to eat or when you're going to go to bed. If I'm there with her, she'll kick me, maybe 11:30, we have a Bundy and Coke, and that's the only time I drink is with her. And then it's just sort of a thing now. And then maybe she wants to go to bed, maybe not. We go with the rhythm of her life, because it's her life.
Not retrofitting another rhythm or a schedule in on top of it. If you've got 24
hours care, what difference does it make? But apparently you have to work to the schedule. And someone with the level of disability like that, when you're trying to minimise the amount of hours a day that they're paying for someone to be there, they even have to open their bowels when we say.
Which is
an affront to human rights.
That's a good word for it.
But we don't realise those things. So this lovely gentleman passed away, and I had to argue with the nurse that it took us 4 hours to get in there because morning routines. And then we weren't curling her hair, and then the nurse said something, and I felt like finding her tonsils for her, and then she couldn't be next of kin, because they were looking for a real person. We're having those kinds of conversations now in our hospitals. We're having this. What started this for me was I was advocating for someone where, I was stood over by a registrar who demanded I changed this person's advanced care directive, and I just crashed. I just fell apart. And then, it was deemed as inappropriate because you're on your own, you have nobody in your life whatsoever. You're about to have your heart stopped and started, and all you've got is my bloody face, and you've had it for years. You've gotten used to me. And I give you a wee kiss on the temple. It's appropriate. I think compassion in care is important, and it's important for the caregiver as well. Because moral injury is also a plague for the healthcare system at the moment, and they don't feel seen, and it's not about the money for those people. It is, if you're hurting them, they'll want more and more money to be where they are. But if they get satisfaction out of it, and we treat people well, then they'll flock back to those roles again. I think certainly with support workers, I think they're treated rather poorly.
Yes, yeah.
They're not trained, they're not honoured, and job security is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I'd been away overseas for a wee while, and I came back and I was like, what the hell have you lot been doing? Everybody's a shift worker.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Is that something that you think?
Look, I think we have to look at the workforce. And, we've talked a bit about, quite a lot about the person with the disability, but the skills in the workforce, the compassion in the workforce, not criticising individuals, but it's not where it could be. There's a lack of, not for everyone, but what I've observed, there's a level of transitory behaviour in the workforce. You work in the disability sector till you can
you mean
find
the revolving door?
Until you can
Yes,
find
I've seen
somewhere
the
better.
revolving door.
For some people, that's their mindset. For others, they get burnt out quite quickly as well. And
there's a lot of pro bono.
Yeah. So it's
for that first client that I advocated for. I think he had something like $380,000 worth of pro bono.
It's a huge amount.
And I had to go and find Scott Morrison at a breakfast doing gate crash with his father, who was a staunch Liberal. And though they'll tell you that no disabled people are Liberals, they are.
Yes, I know quite a few.
Yeah, very staunch. And I had my posh frock, and I was getting ready after the morning routine to, I always have several kits of clothes, and the old man had a need for my knickers.
Okay.
Continence reasons.
Yes.
So I went in my posh frock and no knickers on a very windy day.
Okay.
But Scott Morrison saw nothing. Because
Excellent.
I bent forward in the photo.
Well, that's quite a story, isn't it?
I was like, oh my God. And there were no ambulances were called, but my gosh, it was an embarrassing day. The dear old fellow then needed to go to the hospital later on, and he stripped down and he's got his pink lacy knickers on. He's like, the nurse.
Okay. Oh dear. What a story.
He was very naughty, but we advocated, and the dear fellow had thanks to that coming through, we had a few very, very good years where we squeezed the life out of him. And that's what is the idea, in trying to do that. And I think what's missing is the compassion and the community, and you can't buy it.
No, you can't.
Whereas the government is the carer of last resort. So if you find that you haven't got the skills to look after somebody, 000, tailgate warranty. And they go, why have we got them all here?
Yes.
So is that something that you would see done differently?
Well, we've got to get people with a disability out of hospitals. Hospitals cannot become care homes. Well, that's what they have become. That's occurred over the last decade or so.
Yeah. Now they've been stuffed everywhere else other than the hospital.
Well, they're
it's
trying
$980 billion a year is spent on that.
Trying to get them out of hospitals into quasi-hospitals, really.
It's like broccoli on the plate, kids shoving it wherever they can't be seen by mum.
That's exactly what's happening now. And it's difficult, but we just have to get away from that. It's not right. It's lonely, it's expensive, and it's not dignified.
They say that loneliness is one of the biggest things going at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's
in this country.
It's it's the great pandemic of the 21st century. I come across lonely people all the time as a local member of Parliament, older people, and in particular older people whose spouses have died or they may not have gotten married, high levels of isolation in the community, with children living in other parts of the world because we're such a global community now. I see that all the time, and people with a disability as well.
The housing crisis is something that people are very concerned about. The NDIS is something that people are very concerned about. As much as I would love everybody to have the absolute best of care, we cannot afford to go to $100 billion. We have to find another way of doing it.
Yeah.
And yet I hear of people in Queensland where the gentleman had schizophrenia, and I don't know whether the case has merit or not merit, but the man with schizophrenia had his funds removed, but this man had actually murdered his sister and been in prison for it, and it's not somebody that you would wish to have without care in the community. There are some very concerning things that I think hopefully there'll be a bipartisan, if that's the right word, approach to just doing good at the end for everybody. No showboating from the current saying, look, we're doing, because I don't think anybody can manage it. I think it's just a mess. I don't think the productivity report exposed that, oh, yes, it's terrible, you know, when we decided to do the NDIS. But I don't think anyone had a clue. I mean, had the government been ordered to do that to that degree, to know how many people and what services they did or didn't have, or how much it would cost, or who would be on it, I think that was an impossible thing to do. We have enough trouble doing a census.
True. To be fair. And I think the NDIS, the concept is incredible.
Yeah.
But it has become unwieldy in many ways. There are serious question marks around how some of the money is spent. Okay. And who is being paid for services. I don't mean at a community level with one carer or anything like that. I'm talking about businesses, profit-making ventures that have seen a big pot of money and seen an opportunity. And some without, and that does happen.
Some without tenders have been given very big, a lot of grace.
Yeah, and that does happen. There's no doubt about that. So we should be willing to call it out. I think sometimes in these areas people tread very carefully, almost like they're on eggshells. Oh, we don't want to be seen to be taking things away from people with a disability, but actually sometimes you need to take things away to give more, to actually reform this great idea. Now there's a new federal government and a new minister, and well, they're of a different political persuasion than me, but I'd wish them all the best with this. They've got to take on the challenge. Now, Bill Shorten was the architect of this in the early days. Maybe he's the right person to fix it. Maybe.
I think it will take everybody, but he certainly seems to be across all of the issues.
Yes.
He's not somebody who's not well informed. So, you know, I wish him well too, for everyone's sake. So in 3.5 years' time, when we all go to the polls again, what flag are you going to be waving?
Well, the Liberal flag, obviously.
Well, yes, obviously.
But look, over the coming 3.5 years, I'll be outlining a really detailed policy agenda. I'm big on policy, good quality, evidence-based policy. I think we've got a populist government at the moment that'll say anything, throw massive buckets of money at AFL magic rounds and things like that, which I'm very uncomfortable about.
I'm not particularly. There is quite a crisis out there.
Those sorts of things to distract people from the crisis, the housing crisis, the energy crisis. The
health crisis is very serious,
which this government got elected on. We have to remember. They were.
Well, I don't know. I think it was more that that Liberal lost rather than Labour.
Well, there was the ramping thing became a massive issue.
Yes.
Now it's gotten so much worse. Now we're talking about the negatives of the government. I don't want to do that.
No, I don't want to do that either.
Because I will outline a very detailed policy agenda. It'll be a centre-right party with a centre-right policy agenda. It'll look at empowering people and communities. It'll respect and seek to lift up every part of this state geographically.
So no more trickle down, it's lifting up.
That's how I describe it.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll have a lot to talk about in the coming years, but not yet, because at this stage, and I'm only a few months in, I've got to do a lot of listening and a lot of learning. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. Traveling around different parts of the state, meeting different people from different walks of life in my portfolios, but also across portfolios as the leader of the party, as the alternate Premier of South Australia. I've got to spend this time building up a policy agenda, but doing it through listening and learning.
So for the young people that don't vote, who should be, that we want them to sort of be engaged in politics, should they be voting for Liberal Party values or for the man?
A bit of both. I think it should be a bit of both. You should. But
if they vote for you, will they get you?
They'll get me. That's the sort of politician.
Because that's the sort of trust that people need. Yeah. And I think that's what people felt about Peter Malinauskas, was that they're getting him.
And the proof's in the pudding. We'll see. We'll see how he goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think being a politician is an easy job. It's not one that I would relish or want to do. and I certainly respect anybody who puts themselves out there. I think they must be enormously thick-skinned and have a very good sleeping product.
I
must
sleep
be
well.
difficult.
I sleep well, but it's because I work hard.
You work hard?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for gracing me with your presence.
Well,
It's very
thanks for
kind.
having me on the podcast, and I look forward to continuing discussions because that's how I'll learn.
Well, maybe we should go out and see where's not accessible. I'll show you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.